Today, we're going to be talking about how to solve problems when you're in a crisis. How to solve problems in a crisis. And people experience different types of crises, right? So, for instance, Liliana lost her job. She was working as a waitress and she was just fired. And she didn't get a lot of notice that she was going to be fired, but she lost her job. And she was living at the time with her mother, who happened to be a narcissist. So when she came home and told her mom, hey, mom, I lost my job, her mom responded by kicking her out of the house. Because in her mom's way of thinking, if you lost your job, you're not about to be freeloading off me, she said. And so she kicks Liliana out of the house. Liliana didn't have time to prepare. She didn't have a place to go. She just had her car. So she finds herself driving around. She's trying to find a friend to stay with or a shelter or something. And she didn't have any place to go. And she just broke down in her car and she started crying. Liliana felt like she was in a crisis situation. She didn't know how she was going to solve this situation. She didn't know what she could do to overcome the unbearable difficulty of her situation. And that is actually the definition of a crisis. It is a difficult situation, or a situation that's difficult to solve, or a time of difficulty. So maybe you found yourself in a crisis. Likely, if you suffer from complex trauma, you find yourself in more crisis situations than someone who does not suffer from complex trauma. Why is that? Well, in order for you to feel that you're in a crisis, it's because you feel that you have a problem that's difficult to solve. You're experiencing issues that are difficult for you to overcome. So in order to experience a problem that's difficult to solve or issues that are difficult to overcome, you may feel at times like you are inept, like you don't have what you need in order to be able to solve the problems. But if you're suffering from complex trauma, you are not stupid. You are not dumb. You may have had parents that made you feel that way. You may have had a spouse that tried to tell you that you're dumb or that you're stupid, and they try to point out examples of where you failed to be able to solve a problem. But there's not something inherently broken in you. Trauma changes the brain. You are a survivor of trauma. You have experienced trauma. As a result, the brain is literally damaged by the trauma you have experienced. The amygdala, which is the emergency center of the brain, becomes enlarged, and that's responsible for fight, flight. It puts you into survival mode. So it actually locks the brain into like an emergency mode that is very similar to how your cell phone has an emergency mode when you dial 911. The cell phone takes all of the energy and its resources and puts it toward the applications that will help you in an emergency, and takes it away from applications that are unnecessary so that it will preserve power. Likewise, your brain channels resources to the amygdala when you're in a crisis or a trauma situation so that you can get through the trauma and survive. The amygdala will respond in 1/12 of a second to help you to run or to fight and protect yourself. It is the survival part of the brain. The problem is you cannot live your life with that part of the brain, because if it becomes enlarged because it's being overused, it will flood your system with cortisol. You will experience anxiety to the point of paranoia, sadness to the point of depression, irritation to the point of uncontrolled anger. You will be an emotional wreck when you are guided by the amygdala, the subconscious animal brain, as scientists call it. Likewise, when the brain is locked in this emergency crisis mode, the blood is being drawn away from the prefrontal cortex, and it's being drawn away from the hippocampus. The hippocampus is responsible for memory function. So you may find that you don't have a good memory, or it's difficult for you to learn and retain information. The hippocampus is responsible for differentiating the past and the present. So you may find yourself having flashbacks, or even emotional flashbacks, which make you feel like you're in a trauma situation even when you're not. So your husband may get mad about something and you feel like, oh my God, I can't believe he's angry at me right now. And you flip out to where he would say, you're way overreacting to the situation. But it doesn't feel like an overreaction to you because you feel triggered by his anger or the idea that you've disappointed someone. You find yourself getting triggered by very small things, being in a certain type of room, someone locking a door, someone unlocking a door, someone walking in your room. There's certain things that can trigger you when you're in that trauma, that crisis mode. You're locked in a survival situation in your brain. So your brain is constantly looking for the danger to keep you safe. When your prefrontal cortex shrinks because of trauma, then that's going to limit your ability to problem solve. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for logical thinking. It's responsible for critical thinking. It's responsible for controlling your impulses. It's responsible for helping you to manage your emotions. Without your prefrontal cortex, you're going through life as this emotional zombie, unable to fully process and pick things apart. We need our analytical brain. We have to have the ability to approach problems logically. And so this makes any situation that you're in, any problem that you're experiencing, really escalate in your mind to being a crisis. But I'll tell you this, when you are fully healed and when you're self-actualized, hardly any situation is a crisis to you. You won't feel like you're in a crisis. Those who are suffering from complex trauma and as a result their brain is locked in survival mode, they feel like everything is a crisis. But when you're healed, hardly anything will be a crisis to you. That's because a self-actualized person views problems that come at them basically in these three categories. There's trauma, there's trials, and there's transitions. So in a situation like Liliana's, if she's healed, she would view losing her job and getting kicked out of her house as a transition. Okay, well, I no longer have my old job. I no longer live with my narcissistic mom. I'm transitioning now. This is a transition. It was unwanted. It wasn't on the timing that I wanted, but this is a change, and a change is not always a bad thing. So this is something I need to navigate. One might also view their crisis situation as a trial. When you view something as a trial is like a test. So you may have faith that you're putting into your higher power. You may have faith that you put into your code of conduct. You probably have a purpose. If you're healed, then you have an objective, a goal that you are always striving toward. So if you have an objective, then when something bad happens, you view that as a trial, the way an athlete views a hurdle as just a hurdle, something to jump over on their path to completing their goal and gaining their victory. Trials are a part of life. They're inevitable. We will have hurdles. When we view a crisis as simply a hurdle, as simply an obstacle that we must jump over or find a way around, then that puts us into our prefrontal cortex. Now we're problem solving. This is a good way to look at the crisis situation that we're in. Instead of viewing it as a crisis, you view it as a trial. Okay, this is a test. And what is it a test of? Well, it's a test of my resolve to complete my journey. It's a test of my faith in my code of ethics, my code of conduct. It's a test of my morality. This is a test. A trial is a test. And a test is an opportunity to show what you are made of, to show who you really are. An actualized person views a trial or a crisis as a test, as a trial. When you convert your viewpoint, your perception, it puts you into problem-solving mode. Unfortunately, there are also just blatant traumas. Trauma is like something bad that happens to you, right? In fact, many psychologists and scientists have difficulty actually defining trauma because it's not the same thing for everyone. One person can be in one situation and be traumatized by it, and another person be in the same situation and feel no trauma. Right? Some people can survive a terrorist attack, and one person's ready for work the next day, and another person can't go back to work for a year and a half. So, what really defines a trauma if people are traumatized by different things? Well, I'll give you a definition of a trauma so you can understand it deeply. A trauma is anything that violates the self or violates your values, because your values are actually what make up the self. All of us have a concept in our brain of the self beyond the physical body, like who we are in terms of the metaphysical. And everything that's important to us is like a part of ourself. This is concepts like loyalty, friendship, trust, but it's also things you value and people you value, your children, your parents, your spouse, perhaps, anyone that you value. And maybe you also value the lives of strangers. If you do, then if you see a stranger get killed or get hurt, that would cause you trauma. Whereas someone who does not value the lives of strangers could watch a stranger get run over by a car and show up to work on time with donuts because they don't value that. It is not a trauma to them. So a trauma is anything that violates the values. A violation can be going against a constriction of, a neglecting, not giving you what you value. A trauma or the violation can take many forms, but a trauma is a violation of the self or violation of your values. Now, when you recognize that your crisis is just a violation of your values, then you realize and you start to see it for what it really is. And so instead of saying this is an unsolvable problem, you're able to organize and differentiate, wow, this is a trauma. I am being abused right now because this person is violating my values. This person is doing something to go against what is important to me, to hurt me, to harm me in some way. It's a violation of the self. So when you view your crisis as a trauma or a trial or a transition, that helps you to really organize it and see it from a perspective that allows you to see where you are able to solve things and what you cannot control. Because a trauma in itself, we can't necessarily control that trauma, but we can change our perception of the situation. When something is a trial, you may not be able to control the trial, but you can control how you respond to it. Because in your perception, you're viewing this as an opportunity to show who you really are, as an opportunity to prove your resolve. When you view a crisis as a transition, then it gives you an opportunity to change with the transition, to go through the transition, and to see this as a road to get to someplace better than where you were. But what makes it feel like a crisis is that feeling like we can't solve the problem. So we have to get out of our emotional brain and into our prefrontal cortex and start doing some problem solving. To do this, take out a piece of paper and organize your crisis into two categories. On one side, this is what I control. On the other side of the page, this is what I cannot control. As survivors, we get mixed up sometimes and we start trying to control things that we can't control, and we don't take action where we should. So a person is not doing something in the family that they're supposed to do. My child, my teenager is not doing their homework, and we try to pressure them, control them. You need to do your homework. And we feel this frustration. But the frustration comes from trying to control a human being. Can you control human beings? No. The sooner you recognize that, the sooner you can end your frustration. What can you control? Well, you can control your perception. You can control your actions. That's what you control, your thoughts and your actions, your thoughts and your actions. That's a lot. That's a lot of control already. That's a lot of responsibility. But focus on that. Don't focus on things you can't control, like someone else's thoughts and actions. We make that mistake too often. Focus on what you can control, and the frustration will go down. The depression will diminish. The anxiety will diminish. So in the situation where your teenager is not doing their homework, my thoughts and my perception on this. So for instance, my perception, instead of viewing this as the end of the world, I can view this as a learning curve. I can view this as an opportunity for me to show patience. This is a trial. This is a test for me as a parent. So I can use this as an opportunity to show patience. I can speak to my child. Here's the actions that I can control. I can speak to my child in a way that may appeal to their intellect, appeal to their logic, and help them to understand why it's important for them to do whatever the behavior is I'm hoping that they'll follow through with and do. Does that make sense? So you differentiate everything into what you can control and what you can't control. Anything you have under what you can't control, just crumple it up, throw it away. You can take a lighter or something, you can burn it, but let it go. You can't control it. So don't try. Don't waste your head, your time. Don't beat your head against the wall. Don't try to control things that you can't control. So we want to take energy away from what we can't control. We want to focus our energy on what we can control. As we've talked about, we want to view each crisis as a trial or an opportunity to show who we are and what we are. And we want to differentiate between two things that you can do in every problematic situation. Everything comes down to either working or waiting. Everything is work or wait. You're always doing one of the two when you have to problem solve. So you have to differentiate what is the thing I need to do in this situation? Is this a time I need to work harder? Or is this a time I need to wait? Is this time I need to be patient, or a time I need to show perseverance and persistence? How do you differentiate? Well, let's take some different examples of problems you might have, right? So let's say you need to open up a bank account. So if you need to open a bank account, you're going through that transition. What do you need to do? Do you need to wait around for someone to call you? Or do you need to call the bank? Or do you need to show up to the bank yourself? Well, of course, this is a time that you need to take action, not show patience. So you need to work, right? You need to show perseverance, persistence. You say you call the bank one or two times and they don't answer. What do you need to do? Wait? You may need to continue to show persistence, perseverance, and continue to call, continue to go until finally you get in front of someone and you get the bank account opened. That's how you get things done, is continuing to persist and continuing to act. But isn't there sometimes where you just have to sit back and wait? Some things are a matter of patience. There's some things in life we can't hyper control them into our dominion and get them to break over our knee. And so that is an opportunity to show patience. It's wisdom to wait. For instance, it's not legal for you to drive your car until 2 months from now. It may be the best course of wisdom to wait until your license is cleared for you to drive, or the loan money hasn't come through yet for you to start your business. It may be the best course to wait, to be patient until the money's cleared before you go and just start spending a bunch, right? So sometimes we have to make sure we're waiting. Sometimes we got to make sure we're working. Sometimes we got to be patient. Sometimes we got to be persistent. The wisdom is in being able to choose which thing we do at which time. And to that, I give you the acronym EPIC. You want to make sure you're showing up to whatever crisis situation as your epic self. EPIC stands for ethical, powerful, intelligent, compassionate. You want to show up as your best self. Using the EPIC acronym helps you to wake up the conscious mind and to make sure you're not responding just emotionally or in survival mind, but you're actually showing up as your best self, the way you were made to be, as a spiritual superlative being. someone that's able to problem solve and analyze and be wise in the deepest sense. So take, for instance, being ethical. When you show up to a situation ethically, then you're not going to be violent. You're not going to cheat. You're not going to harm someone. You're going to honor your code of ethics. You're going to be moral. You're going to be looking out for the benefits of others, right? You're going to show up with a viewpoint towards justice and righteousness. So you want to show up as your ethical self to any problem. When you show up as your powerful self to any problem, you're not just simply giving in, oh, well, I guess this is the end for me. I can't, and just saying I can't and thinking that you're powerless and there's nothing you can do. When you show up as your powerful self, you don't feel trapped. When you show up as your powerful self, you're looking for what you can do. You're focusing on what you can control and you're taking action. You're using your voice to speak up for yourself, to advocate for yourself. You're enforcing your boundaries by saying no. That's being powerful. That's showing up as your powerful self. You're using your talents, your abilities, your potential to be able to solve the problem. You're applying yourself to solve the issue. We show up as our intelligent self. If you show up as your intelligent self, you're not gonna feel like you're not gonna start doing things that you shouldn't do, because an intelligent person is wise. The definition of both wisdom and intelligence is to apply what you know. To apply what you know, to put into application, into action, what you know is right to do, what you know you should do. That's wisdom. That is intelligence, to apply what you know. So in other words, you will not do what you know you should not do. You won't look back and say, I knew I shouldn't have did that. You will take the knowledge, the understanding that you have, and you will apply it to the situation and say, I know what to do right now. I know exactly how to handle this. And you'll handle it according to your best understanding. You'll analyze the information that you have in front of you and do what's logical. And finally, if you show up with your compassion, then you're not going to try to harm someone, right? You're not going to yell back at someone with harsh words to try to hurt them. If you're compassionate, you're going to understand their feelings. And you're going to do what's best for yourself, because you're loving to yourself, and what's best for others. So we want to balance in all of those qualities and show up as our epic self to solve problems. So when we think about Liliana's situation, how she lost her job and then she got kicked out, she feels like she's got no place to go, nothing she can do. Was she in a crisis? Well, she could view it that way. She could say, this is a crisis situation. And woe is me. And this is so unfair that I have to go through this. I can't believe that I'm experiencing a crisis like this. And at my age, I shouldn't have to do this. And she can just think herself right down a negative spiral where she feels worse and worse, which motivates her to take less and less action. And as she takes less and less action, she's not in her power. And then she applies less intelligence, and instead she's just in her emergency mind, which is emotional, which just says, I just want to lay on my back seat and just sleep. And then eventually, since she's just sitting there in her car and it's just idle, the police come along and they tell her, you can't have your car here. And things just continue to spiral and get worse and worse for her. Or she can change the way that she's perceiving this trial that she's in. And that's what Liliana did. She said, I didn't view it as a crisis. What I looked at, what I was going through, I looked at it as a transition and a temporary trial, a temporary test to apply what I had been learning from what I had been reading, what I had learned from my recovery course. This was my opportunity to apply patience This was my opportunity to apply forgiveness. This was my opportunity to take action and to be in my personal power. And so she viewed it as that, as an opportunity to show what she could do. So she kept calling until she found someone that she could temporarily stay with. And that person helped her to find a place that she could rent on her own. But there was the issue of the job. She continued to ask and inquire and ask and inquire. Soon her mom called her back and said, you can come back home if you want to. In this particular case, Liliana decided not to go back home. It wouldn't have been wrong to, but she decided to prioritize her mental health over her financial well-being. Because sure, it would have been easier financially to just go home with her mom. But if she continued to stick it out now that she was out, she would have freedom from her mom, privacy. She would have personal pride in herself for what she was able to accomplish, joy. She would have autonomy. She would have peace. She would have safety from not being emotionally abused. She felt it was really her best choice to just try to make the best of the situation as it stood. It wasn't her fault that she was out on her own. It was her mom's. But now she was going to take responsibility for the rest of her life instead of continuing to look to her mother to be her savior. And she did. It took her a while, but she found a job. And then she was off to the races. She was able to pay her bills. And she currently continues to live independently on her own as a healed person from CPTSD. Her brain is no longer in crisis mode. She learned to look at these crises as trials, transitions, traumas, opportunities to make a change. She didn't try to control what she couldn't. She never tried to tell her mom how her mom should act, try to get her mom to go to therapy or to change. She didn't do that. She let her mom be exactly who her mom is. And to this day, her mom is still as narcissistic as she always has been, and she didn't try to change it. But Liliana is healed. Liliana is free. Liliana is independent. Liliana has self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth, self-love, self-compassion because of her choice to take her life into her own hands, to make her own choice, to make her own decision, and to show up to her situation epic. She is her epic self. So if you're listening to this and you're struggling with trauma or you're going through a crisis right now, I implore you to follow the example of Liliana. Look at your situation and get logical about it. Activate that prefrontal cortex. Start making charts and lists and analyzing, what can I control? What can I not control? What can I change? What can I not change? What is my responsibility? What is not my responsibility? And take action where it's appropriate and wait and be patient where necessary. Have a plan, have a goal, have a purpose that you're striving towards. And when you do that, everything will fall into place and you will be powerful. You will be your best self and you will be healed. You will come to become self-actualized like Liliana has.